to the flow and determining the high heating value and whether it met the 2.5% criteria. So, but that shouldn't bias me in any way.
And so you believe that you would have no bias, or you can hear this matter today?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'll just ask Mr. McDonough if there's any objection.
We have no objection.
Okay, and Ms. Feldman?
No objection.
Okay. And I believe we'll go off the record, and we'll be back hopefully within 10 to 15 minutes when our final board member appears, and we can review some of the exhibits that we've received. We're off the record.
Should light up, shouldn't it?
Yeah, you're good. I hear you.
Off. Yeah, so if the lights aren't working, but, oh, no, there it is.
We're back on the record. Good morning again. Ms. Fellman, if you'd like to begin with your opening today.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the board. You should have before you a binder that contains the district's exhibits in this case, exhibit number 1 being a proposed stipulated order for abatement.
We'll just give a moment.
We'll give Ms. Verdugo Peralta a moment to get settled. No problem. I'm very glad to be here on a stipulated order for abatement. And the reason for the binders is not because I want to pamper you this morning with giving you the exhibits in an unprecedented organized fashion, but because up until yesterday, pretty much noon, I was preparing for a contested order this morning, an adversarial hearing. It took us that long, not because Ralph's was resisting in any way coming into compliance. It was just a matter of logistics and communication, and the amount of time that it took for Ralph's in particular to have a clear path going forward to compliance. I'm sure they can fill in the details there because I sure don't have them. But in any event, we now have a spectacularly organized presentation of a stipulated order for abatement. The outcome is just as we wanted it to be. The proposed findings that you have before you this morning contain the conditions that the district was working towards and that Ralph's was prepared to deliver ultimately. And the reason why we were so enthusiastic about reaching the point of a stipulated order is because this is an environmentally beneficial program. The case centers on a waste to energy process at a facility in Compton where a biodigester is used to produce biogas that actually is used at the facility to provide a source of power. We wanted to preserve that program, and I certainly didn't want to be put in a position where I had no recourse but to ask this hearing board to shut it down. And instead, you'll see that although the compliance schedule is likely to be long, given the sophistication of the equipment that's required to bring the facility into compliance, we believe it is worth the effort. So that being the case, this does concern a waste-to-energy facility at Ralph's facility in Compton. There were problems from the start with the implementation of the program and the equipment that was associated with it. The district worked with Ralph's over a protracted period of time to identify the source of the problems and to come up with compliance options that would lead to consistent and ongoing compliance with district rules. The district intends to present 2 witnesses for you here this morning, the district engineer, who will essentially explain the process generally, its permitting history, how the flare, which is the problem source in this case, how the flare is used and what the problems are associated with it, the efficacy of the compliance path going forward, and the inspector who will explain the violation to you in greater detail, even though making a finding of violation is not required in a stipulated order. I think it would be valuable to give this board some context as to how we discovered the problems and what the violations actually consist of. I would urge the hearing board, when we're hearing the testimony from the district witnesses, to remember that Ralph's is the one that can best answer your questions about the specifics regarding the operation of the process and the nature of the equipment that's at the facility, as well as the compliance plan going forward. So I would urge you to keep that in mind as you ask questions of the district's witnesses. And that concludes my opening.
Thank you, Ms. Feldman, and thank you for explaining why we have so many. I was wondering, wait a minute. Thank you for that. Mr. McDonough, your opening.
Well, I probably couldn't have said any of that better myself. I can confirm that we've reached an agreement with the district to address the recurring issues on the digester and the digester flare at the Compton warehouse. There's really not much to add to what Ms. Feldman said, other than to say that we have been working collaboratively with the district to come up with solutions to the multiple technical problems we've had with this equipment, as you're going to hear in testimony. As you heard from Ms. Feldman, these are beneficial units. There is an environmental benefit in multiple ways to divert food waste from landfills and have them go to these waste-to-energy units, because they save energy, they save burden on the grid, they help with mitigating climate change because it allows a renewable source of electricity without using fossil fuels, takes greenhouse gases out of the air, and it also avoids contributing to the lack of landfill space and, you know, the potential future pollution of air and water and soil that comes with that. So there's a lot of good reasons to keep the unit operating. We're very pleased to be able to come to you in a stipulated way with a plan to do that. And as we go through the testimony, we're hoping to be able to answer questions for you about the operation of the unit and what it is we're proposing as the permanent fix. But in a nutshell, there's going to be two things that are part of the plan. The first is that Ralph's is going to construct and operate a new reciprocating engine that's going to resolve the reliability issues with the previous gas consumers. The second is that Ralph's is going to plan to install a new smaller flare. The benefit of that is that a smaller flare is able to maintain a more consistent burn temperature at a lower flow rate. And we believe these pieces of equipment together are going to help resolve our nagging flare temperature issues once and for all. The one thing we'll have to caution at the beginning is that because we've just received approval for this project just this week, Ralph's doesn't yet have a bid out to contractors to actually perform the work, and some details on what the timeframes are going to ultimately be are not set in stone yet. So what we're proposing, you'll see in the order, is to return to the board in April with a proposed compliance plan and our proposed timelines for the work. We believe by that time we will have a contractor engaged and we will have a better idea of what the timelines are going to look like. And in the interim, we'll also propose a set of monitoring and reporting measures to ensure that we keep the district informed and apprised of the progress towards a permit. So again, we're very happy that we were able to come to the agreement, and we think it's a win-win for Ralph's and the district and the environment.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Ms. Feldman, your first witness.
Yes, the district will call Don Nguyen. Mr. Nguyen, if you would please state your name and spell it for the record.
Yes, good morning. My name is Don Nguyen. That's DONNGUYEN.
And what is your position here with the district?
I'm the senior air quality engineer.
Have you taken the oath this morning?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Could you please just give a general overview of what your responsibilities are here at the South Coast AQMD?
I basically review the engineer's work on permit evaluations here at the district for mechanical and chemical team.
And in that capacity, did you review the permit file associated with the equipment at the Ralph's facility in Compton?
Yes, I have reviewed it.
Okay. Could you please explain to the board, just in broad terms, what is a waste-to-energy process?
So as Mr. McDonough had pointed out, in simplest terms, and as it relates to Ralph's, Kroger, they take unused and unsold raw organic material, not raw, but organic material such as like unused breads, fruit, produce, that kind of thing. They take it to this facility, and that is introduced into this basically like a large digester tank in addition to microbes and heat that basically starts the decomposition process. And from that decomposition process, methane gas, along with like CO2 gas, is produced. But the methane gas is what is then used as a combustion fuel for their equipment, which at the time of permitting was microturbines and boilers. And then any excess unused digester gas would have been sent to their flare.
Okay, thank you. And is digester gas used interchangeably in our documents with biogas?
For the purposes of this hearing, yes.
Okay. And generally, is waste to energy an environmentally beneficial program?
Yes, it is.
Were you the permitting engineer for this facility?
No, I was not.
Do you know when the original permits were issued for this particular project?
Yes, I do. It was issued in June of 2011.
And the exhibit that we have, which I will turn the hearing board's attention to now, is exhibit number 2. So if you go to your binder and just flip over to tab 2, is that the portion of the reclaim permit that pertains to the equipment at issue in this case?
Yes, it is.
And could you just walk the hearing board through these few pages so that they know what they're looking at here?
So as I mentioned, the original permits to construct were issued in June 2011. This is the latest, I would say, the latest revision that's applicable to this case. So just obviously the first page is the cover page that shows that the latest revision that we did here was to convert the flare at issue that is issued in this case from a permit to construct to a permit to operate. That's where we moved it from Section H to Section D in our facility permit. And then the following pages are the actual final issued permit. If I could point the board's attention to page, where is it? Sorry, page 9.
And you'll find the page number at the upper right-hand corner
Sorry, yes.
of the permit.
So on page 9, System 2 air pollution control is that flare that is in question today. And there are conditions associated with it. And if you continue on to page 15, that is the condition at question today, the 1400 degrees Fahrenheit.
And that's C8.2.
C8.2, yes, correct.
Now, C8.2 mandates that the flare not be operated at less than 1400 degrees Fahrenheit, is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of this condition?
That is the BACT or BACT requirement for these type of equipment flares that burn on digester gas for destruction of VOCs.
Now, you mentioned that there were permits issued for other pieces of equipment, boilers and microturbines, that were also part of the waste-to-energy project when the process was originally permitted by the district. What happened to those pieces of equipment? Are they still part of this case?
Well, they're indirectly part of this case, but to answer your question specifically, if you're asking about the microturbines, again, they were originally issued as part of the permit in 2011, but as of, I believe, March 2018, they decommissioned those microturbines, and they're actually no longer on site, as I understand it. And then the boilers themselves, again, they were issued in 2011 to run on both digester gas and natural gas, a blend of the two. But as it stands in this 2018 permit going forward, they are only fired on natural gas.
So the only piece of equipment that was originally permitted as part of the biogas process is the flare.
The flare is the only thing that is using that digester gas as of today.
Okay. And the 1400 degree threshold for the flare, was that a permit condition that was imposed from the very beginning?
Yes, it was.
Has it changed over the course of years?
No, it has not.
Okay. What is the consequence of operating the flare at a lower temperature?
Again, as I had mentioned, this is best available control technology for the destruction of volatile organic compounds. So not reaching the 1400 degrees means that there's incomplete destruction of the VOCs.
And does that mean there are more VOC emissions than contemplated by the permit?
Yes.
Considering that there were other pieces of equipment associated with the waste-to-energy program, when the flare was first permitted, was it intended to be used the way it is currently used at this facility?
No, it was not.
And how was it intended to be used?
It was intended, as the permit describes, as a backup to the primary equipment, which would have been the microturbines and the boilers. So the primary use was to whatever biogas, the majority of the biogas that was produced would have been used by the microturbines to then create supplemental power for the facility. And then the boilers would have used that biogas to create steam for the creamery operations at the facility.
So now the flare seems to have a much larger task than we ever intended. Was that fair to say?
That's fair to say, yes.
Have you been informed about Ralph's compliance status regarding the operation of the flare?
Yes, I have.
And what were you told?
I was told, again, that they were not meeting their temperature condition, that 1400 degrees Fahrenheit.
And were you informed by compliance staff?
I was.
And were any reasons offered to you as to why the temperature dips were occurring?
Yes, initially the idea or the thinking was that there was a faulty thermocouple, which is, again, the device that would be used to measure the temperature at the flare.
And to the best of your knowledge, did Ralph's replace the faulty thermocouple?
They not only replaced it, but I believe they added a backup thermocouple a little bit higher than the original position of the first thermocouple.
To the best of your knowledge, did that resolve the problems with not meeting the threshold at the flare?
As I recall, initially, yes.
And then what happened?
And then there was more data presented by that our compliance staff had found that they were, again, going below the temperature threshold.
Based on your engineering experience and what you know at this facility, do you think that Ralph's can maintain 1400 degrees at this present flare without further changing its operations or equipment at the facility?
In my professional opinion, no, not at this time.
Have you reviewed the proposed findings and decision in this case?
Yes, I have.
And do you believe that it represents the best way to ensure compliance while Ralph's goes forward in this?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And are you familiar with the operation of a reciprocating engine?
Yes.
Could you explain to the hearing board just very basically what a reciprocating engine is?
Again, the engine is, again, it's going to run on this digester gas, and it's going to basically, there's going to be a generator set that's connected to it, and it's going to create the power that's going to, again, supplement the electrical usage at the facility.
To the best of your knowledge, is this a complex piece of equipment?
No, it's a tried and true piece of equipment that's been used thoroughly throughout the agency.
Are you aware of any other reciprocating engine that is operated by Ralph's or Kroger's in the country?
Well, the facility does have other reciprocating engines that just run on natural gas, but that's for emergency power. I think they have like 7 on their permit.
Are you aware of a reciprocating engine that is used in the way that this one is proposed to be used anywhere?
I personally do not, but again, we have a Rule 1110.2 that deals specifically with digester gas-fired engines, so there obviously is such a type of equipment.
The proposed order also contains a provision that they will get a smaller flare to install at the facility. Give us your opinion of that.
I believe that should help mitigate the situation with the 1400 degrees temperature in this case, because again, the original intent of that flare was to handle higher flow, so that because the current situation is that the facility has this low flow situation, they need a smaller flare in order to create that or get to that 1400 temperature condition to incinerate the VOCs.
Okay. So just to give the hearing board a better idea of an overall summary, if you could flip to Exhibit 3 in your binders. Can you tell that this is labeled Feed Compton Facility Guide at the top of the page? Could you explain to the hearing board what this is and where you found it?
So again, this is a nice general summary of the waste-to-energy process at the facility, and where I found it is in the engineering files. I believe this was part of their original submittal for this project.
So this gives an overview of how the waste-to-energy program works at the Compton facility, is that correct?
Yes.
If you would flip over to Exhibit 4. And please explain to the hearing board what they are looking at here.
So this is just an aerial photo that they had taken, again, to show that whole waste-to-energy process in that, in the center of the picture there.
Can you see the flare in this picture?
I do.
And could you point it out for the hearing board?
It would be that candlestick-looking device that's in between those, the large tank on the left and on the right. It's in between those two tanks.
And does this exhibit also essentially summarize the benefits of the recovery system associated with the biogas process?
Yes, as it was originally proposed.
Okay. And one more, just flip over to Exhibit 5. And let the hearing board know what they're looking at here.
This is just, again, an aerial photo pulled back a little bit further. You can still see the waste-to-energy system on the upper right corner, as well as the rest of the facility. So you can see the entire footprint of the facility. It's actually a very large facility.
It's really kind of massive, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, in the pictures we've just seen, is the flare there?
It's there. It's probably in the shadows, so it's a little hard to see in this last picture in Exhibit 5, but it is there.
Okay, so it's near where we see the round building in the middle.
Yeah, so if you look at that larger tank on the left, if you look just slightly right of that, in between the shadow, and there's a little bit of sun, you can kind of make it out right there.
I see it, thank you.
Okay, so just to sum up for you, Mr. Nguyen, in reviewing the proposed order and seeing that it will ultimately require Ralph's to order and install a reciprocating engine and a smaller flare to operate at the facility, is it your understanding and opinion that this should bring the facility into ongoing consistent compliance with the condition in the permit that requires operation at 1400?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. McDonough, do you have any questions?
Not for this witness.
I have a number of questions. First of all, I'm wondering if you have any ballpark estimate for us of what the excess VOCs are in terms of looking at what we see in the proposed order. The failure rate is still 24% in terms of not meeting the 1400 degrees, and I just want to have an idea of what we're talking about.
Madam Chair, I wish I could give you an answer to that, but unfortunately, I do not know truly the destruction efficiency of this flare in its current state. I do recall there was previous source test data. Again, it may not be an apples-to-apples comparison because, again, it was operating more efficiently. It was more constantly at or above 1400 degrees. But I believe the results from that source test a few years ago was about, the VOC outlet was about 0.04 pounds per hour, something to that effect.
I'm sorry, what year was that source test?
I want to say 2016, 17. I'd have to go look at records to find that out.
And just for the board, for myself, I'm an attorney, not really, I'm a little bit more of a lay person when it comes to this. Can you give us a general idea, is that relatively high, 0.04 pounds per hour? Is that relatively low excess amount compared with?
Again, as it was originally intended, again, if it was meeting the 1400, then it was, in our minds, it met BACT and it was destructing the VOCs to our satisfaction. So relatively should be on a lower scale.
Oh, relatively on a lower scale, okay. And do you happen to have any idea, I know you provided the pictures, which gives us an idea of where it is in the facility. How close are the residential neighborhoods or?
The inspector can testify to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for correcting that. The intended project is a reciprocating engine. Do you know the difference between that and, for example, the microturbines and the boiler? And in the following way, when I read the petition, I read that the biogas was a problem for the boilers, then the biogas was a problem for the microturbines. How do you know that the biogas won't be a problem for this reciprocating engine?
Well, you won't know, I guess, for certainty, but I think in general, an engine is a little bit more hefty in that sense. It probably will, as I understand it, the microturbines were a little bit more finicky because the biogas itself is not clean like natural gas is. So because there's other constituents in the gas, the microturbines weren't operating as I was told verbally by the facility, that they never did operate all three at any one point. So an engine is, again, it's just, I guess, again, a little bit more hefty, and it can just handle the fluctuations of the composition of the gas. So the general thinking is that it can run more often.
Thank you. And then the final question that I had was, I saw in the proposed order on page, well, the pages I don't think are numbered in this, but it's paragraph 17 in the facts and the findings right before the conclusions.
Yes.
It says, you seek the stipulated order to allow Ralphs to resolve noncompliance through installation of the reciprocating engine anticipated to begin March 2021. Do you have any insight as to why we wouldn't see it beginning until 2021?
Until they present that compliance plan, I don't know. In general, I think in previous meetings, we were told that it will just take some time to fabricate this engine for them.
Okay, but
It's not something off the shelf, is my understanding.
okay, so you mentioned that it was something that was tried and true. It was your
Engines-
words.
Yes.
But to your knowledge, it still needs to be specifically fabricated for this use?
And for this facility, I believe so, yes.
Okay. Do you think any of that would be a permitting issue? I also saw as part of the order that they would apply for expedited processing. Do you anticipate that the review by the district would take an extraordinary amount of time, or do you have any idea?
No, it should not.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Board members, Dr. Bernstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Nguyen. I just wanted to
Morning.
clarify for me, once again, the operations of a reciprocating engine and what rule pertains to the usage of that machinery?
So the rule is 1110.2 specifically because this engine is running on digester gas.
Okay, 1110.2.
Point 2, right. The 1110 series is all engines, but the point 1, point 2, that it depends on what it's running on and the size.
Okay. And how does it function?
So again, the point of this engine was to replace these microturbines that were there. So like, an engine in your car, right? So it's going to run on a fuel. In this case, it's digester gas or biogas. And there will be a generator set that's attached to this engine So the mechanical force that's created from this engine running will then run this generator set, and that generator will create power to supplement power at the facility.
Okay, so the reciprocating part is, I'm just trying to figure out what's the reciprocating, what does that mean?
Oh, so reciprocating just
Forgive
means,
me.
like I guess like in any engine, it's the pistons that kind of go back and forth, so it reciprocates in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Balagopalan.
Mr. Wynn,
Yes.
let me bring your attention to the condition for the 1400 degrees and the
Okay.
permit. I was just
So that's Exhibit 2, right, Mr. Mbalo?
yes, it is Exhibit 2 and Condition 8.2.
Okay.
C 8.2.
Page 15 of the permit.
Yes.
In the second, the last sentence in the paragraph below that, it says the temperature shall be measured at a location above the plane at least 0.6 second downstream. It does say 4 feet below the top of the stack, but I find it unusual to see that a time dimension is given instead of
I think that might be somewhat of a typo. It should say that, because I think that 0.6 seconds is the
the retention
retention
time.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So has to be corrected then.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Part of the explanation given for the flare, for the flare not working properly or maintaining the temperature, I saw in the petition was low flow.
Correct.
And but initially the design was to handle 3 microturbines and then to blend in to the 2 boilers.
Correct.
The digested gas.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And so now all that gas is going to the flare.
Unfortunately, yes.
But it's, I think also read in the petition that they've changed because of the Route Zero waste policy, the feed that is coming, and so the gas production is also low.
Yes.
So if the gas production is low and the flare can handle it, if you put in an engine,
So the flare actually can't handle that low flow.
how is the engine going to work with such low flow? Are there going to be issues with low flow for the engine to produce electricity without, what is the minimum amount of flow it needs? And, so if engine is looking at the panacea to the solution, but if the underlying issue is low flow, where are you going to get the flow for operating the engine sufficiently to generate electricity?
So we're not, right now, we actually don't know whether the low flow situation would have an effect on this potential engine. It depends on how they design the engine and the size and all that, but with the flare, there's definitely an issue with the low flow.
Right, but and again, the low flow being, if you have insufficient flow going to the flare, then there's a problem with, potentially then for the engine too.
Right.
Unless something else.
So in terms of, again, flow, right, so basically, they're not getting enough organic material coming in. So they are looking at other avenues to try to supplement that organic material from, I believe, maybe other competitors or other landfill, things like that. They're looking into trying to supplement that to increase their flow. And as part of their project that's why they want to bring in this new smaller flare, but yet maintain and keep, my understanding is keep the existing larger flare just in case when they get back to higher production, that if it's a high flow situation, they still have the larger flare for that purpose as well. So their intent is still to produce the digester gas and hopefully get back up to levels that they were before.
Right, yeah, and not flare it by using it in the engine.
Correct.
And you happen to know, or maybe they can answer it, if it's going to be a combined heat and power or just a,
We have not gotten any details about the engine.
okay. Now, the flare is subject to 18.1?
The flare, I believe, is subject to it. I actually haven't, I'm not that familiar with 1118.1.
There is a condition on page 9, not a condition, the emission requirement. If you look at page 9 on the flare, the NOx is listed as 0.06 pounds per million BTU, digester gas?
That is the BACT limit, yes.
And is that also in 1118? Do you know if they've tested and demonstrated this limit? Are they in compliance with this limit?
I believe some of those prior tests show compliance with that limit.
Was it done when they had low flow and low,
No, I don't believe so.
I mean, not low, when the temperature?
Normal, I think it was the normal conditions,
But you don't know?
but I'm not sure, yeah.
Okay, so, okay. So do you know if there was a recent test that was conducted on the flare?
I do not.
The microturbines, there were 3 microturbines on site. You said they were, and I can relate. I've been there to the facility. I know they had, as you indicated, they had operational problems running. They were up and down, but, I mean, they were taken out of service. But they've been completely removed from site, you said?
That's my understanding. I haven't been out there to verify that, but as of March 2018 is my understanding when they were shut down.
Now, do you happen to know the reason why they're not blending it with the fuel for the boilers?
I do not. Again, I think it was operational situations. They couldn't get it to function all the time.
These are probably questions best directed to respondent.
Okay, I will do that. I just said, I know you gave us the, on exhibit 3, the feed, the flow diagram,
Yes.
and that was from application. Do you know if that company feed is still handling?
I believe they're still involved, yeah. They've been to meetings as recent as October, I believe.
All right. And are you aware of any H2S issues?
They have an odor scrubber as well as part of this project. So I believe there is some H2S involved because there is that odor scrubber that got permitted.
What about the ammonia?
I'm not 100% sure, so.
All right, thank you.
Board members? Senator?
In 2018, the failure rate was 63%, which is noted. In 2019, the failure rate was 24%. What did the RAF do different to bring about the improvement?
Yes, Senator, that's a good question. So my understanding after discussions with the facility is that, again, they realized that there was an issue here, and they couldn't do anything on the front end in terms of bringing in more organic material. So one of the problems they had when they originally permitted this digester system is that my understanding is the city of Compton would not allow them to have a storage tank to store the digester gas because of explosive concerns. So whatever they produce, they have to use. So they've come up with ways of instead of whatever they produce, let's say it's this amount, instead of sending it all through the flare at once, they basically kind of try to even it out and cycle it so that a little bit at a time would go so that it would help to maintain that temperature more consistently. So I think that's the base root of why they went from 60-some% down to now 20-something% in 2019.
In 2014, the facility decided to feed the digestives only with produce, no meat, no dairy products, so on. What was the failure rate at that point in time prior thereto?
I actually don't know if there was a failure rate at that point. The reason why they stopped introducing the meat and dairy product, the meat trimmings, because in 2014 they had an upset condition. I think the term they used was rapid expansion. So basically that digester tank overflowed and it had a big mess all over the place.
No, they closed the grocery stores in the area, thereby reducing the amount of food waste sent to the facility.
That, along with, I believe they were also doing donations to food banks and things like that of unused
All that.
products, so,
So the feed was substantially reduced
yes,
based on what RAF has done
correct,
in terms of operation.
yes.
Did they share that with you at the time?
At the time,
That's 2014.
no.
Share with the district?
No, that wasn't brought up at that time, no.
Well, then the failure rate must have been very excessive at that point in time when they made that change in operation. How would the district know?
I can't answer to when that whole process started where they were closing up the stores and donating more product. So I don't know that timeline, so I can't answer that question.
Aren't they required to keep a record of the temperatures being emitted at the flare?
Yes,
Well, did the record at the facility show what the temperature was at that time?
I believe our compliance staff can answer that question a little bit better than I can.
Is he here?
Yes.
Will you be able to answer the question when you come to your turn?
When it comes to his
I said when it
turn,
comes to his turn, I'm asking.
I don't think you should ask him anything until it's his turn.
Thank you, boss. All right. Well, then you went for the thermocouple.
Yes, the thermocouple.
Yeah, what effect would that have?
So again, the thermocouple in simplest terms is the device that measures the temperature in this flare. And the records that you're talking about are derived from those readings of the thermocouple.
Well, Ralph decided to make a decision on their own with the support of the district to measure the temperature at the flare rather than the other process that they were using, digestive stuff.
Well, actually, that permit condition C 8.2 requires the facility to measure the temperature at the flare.
And they never put a measuring device at the flare.
No, it was always there
Not,
since the permit was issued, or the flare was constructed.
I think you're talking about the flow, isn't there a flow meter or?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about,
Stack flow, are you referring to the stack flow monitor that's
yeah,
referenced?
right,
in-
monitor was not there.
You can address that.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the thermocouple, sorry. So I'm sorry, Senator, what was the question about the flow
Well,
meter?
it was suggested that you would install that monitor, but you never did.
Not the district. The respondent has the responsibility to
I understand
install
that, but well,
the
they never.
thermocouple
they
and
ne-
the monitor.
Well, they never notified the district they had done this per requirement, to your knowledge.
They had never notified the district. So as part of the compliance investigation by our compliance staff, they determined I believe it was April 2019 when they did the site investigation of the facility, that at that time, the facility still had not installed the stack flow monitor for the flare.
Right, a few years after they were required to do it.
And so the permit with that condition for the stack flow monitor was issued April 2018, April 13, 2018. So they have technically a year to comply with that installation requirement. So they had it up to April 12th of 2019.
Was it done on time?
No, it was not.
Okay.
I just had one follow-up question. With regard to your explanation of why they were able, to your understanding, to go from 68% failure to 24% failure, and you mentioned that they were able to even the flow by some sort of cycling, is that correct?
That's generally my understanding, yes.
Do you have any understanding as to whether or not, if that were a requirement to continue that, so that we will see the failure rates staying at a low percentage, that would not be safe, or there be any other barriers?
I don't know of any unsafe conditions that, again, they've been doing it up to this point to help in that, and so I haven't heard of anything that's gone wrong in that sense.
Okay, so to your knowledge, and I'll ask them as well, but to your knowledge, there's no reason then why that should not be a requirement moving forward under an order?
No reason.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Nguyen? Yes?
I had a follow-up. I know in the initial petition, there was the issue of the stack flow monitor pending certification from the district. To your knowledge, has that been certified now, the stack flow monitor?
To my knowledge, as of a couple days ago, no. The source testing division is still waiting for the source test results from the facility. The certification source test results.
so that it's
They
not?
did, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish it.
So they have done, first, they have installed the staff flow monitor, they have conducted the tests, but they have not submitted the results of that test, that certification test, to our source testing division.
And it's, to your knowledge, do you know if it's working properly even with the low flow?
To my knowledge, I don't know one way or the other yet, but I assume yes.
And they are, to your knowledge, they're recording the flow, right?
Yes, to my knowledge, yes.
And, okay, so they're pending the final result?
Correct.
For the, okay, so that's still pending then?
Yes.
So are they in violation of, well, it's now, the burden's on the South Coast AQMD to certify it. They've installed it, it's running, and,
It's on the South Coast AQMD burden up to the point when they submit the actual results. So as of a couple of weeks ago, they had, I believe, sent out another email requesting that the results be submitted, but they haven't heard back since.
okay, we'll ask the facility the status. Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Senator?
Right, in the order, number 2, it says on line 4, on the next following page, a set of proposed monitoring.
Oh, are you saying number 2 in the findings, not in the actual order? Okay.
This is the order.
Oh, what, oh, is it,
I think the next page is what the senator is referring to.
Right, next page over, on line 4.
So you're referring to paragraph 2 of the order and the
Line 4 of the.
line 4 of the next page, which would be the start of the third
Oh.
bullet point.
I see.
That you have to install a set of proposed monitoring and reporting measures. I thought they were already in place. Are they not in place? If they could be required to do it per the order.
Not sure how to answer this. I think this is just to ensure that they continue this type of monitoring and reporting measures that they're doing. Enforceable measures.
Right, Senator,
Submit.
there was testimony that Ralph's has been, and the inspector can elaborate on this, they have been monitoring and submitting reports of temperature, but they were not required to do that. So this order will make sure that it is a requirement and legally enforceable, that they
I
submit
just
that
read
information.
I'm sorry, on the first page of the, number 2 of the order says that respondents shall prepare and submit the district inspector a compliance plan. If you're going to submit the plan, to me, it suggests it has not been done. But now you're
We
saying
don't
it's
mean
been-
to suggest that. We only mean to inform you that up until issuance of this order, even though they have been engaged in that practice, it was not legally required for them to do so. So they could have stopped at any time submitting all the temperature data to the inspector. But they took it upon themselves to do that. We just want to incorporate it in the order to make sure that their compliance plan will be legally enforceable.
Now, is this plan expected to be a fix to the problem?
The inspector will talk further
I
about,
know, but you started answering, so
yeah, but I'm not testifying.
Yeah,
I'm
yes,
just
let's
summarizing
hold that for the
testimony
then let him
inspector.
answer the question then.
of the engineer. The compliance officer is here. The inspector is also here and will be presented next. Mr.
Inspector-
Nguyen is the engineer. He has nothing to do with the compliance plan.
The inspector's going to inspect whether or not the monitoring devices are there. So I'm just asking him at this point in time.
Okay, but we will wait until he's been introduced and.
You're the inspector, right?
I'm
we're
sorry,
going
no,
to-
I'm the engineer, sir.
No,
Sorry about that.
yes, okay, that's the issue. Okay, yes, Mr.
Okay,
Nguyen
thank you.
is the engineer.
Thank you for clarifying, Ms. Prusek.
Mr. Nguyen, one other question, I'm sorry that I just realized. again, I want to try to understand. I understand that this is going to run on biogas. It has to be fabricated, and by this I mean the reciprocating engine. But you did mention, again, I'm going to go back to your words, tried and true, of the reciprocating engine. Do you have any opinion, one way or the other, as to why we need to wait until April 15th in order to have a permit to construct submitted to the district? An application, sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of applications, I believe they should submit prior to this. If they think that they will be up and running by March of 2021, obviously we need lead time to process that application.
So, okay, so just going to the order, the order is, the proposed order has that under paragraph 1 of the order itself, line 21, on or before April 15th, 2020, respondent shall apply for a permit to construct. Is it your belief that that can be earlier? I just want to hear from you before I hear from Ralph's.
It would be nice to get it earlier, but if we understand the situation and that there is some lead time to fabricate this engine, and then to get the details of how this engine will operate, those parameters, if it takes them that long, then that's how long we'll have to wait. But because they need that detail in order to submit a complete application, if they cannot provide it before then there would be no need to submit an application before then.
Okay, so but they can't submit an application before they have spoken with whomever it is will be fabricating the engine and find out the exact
The details, yes,
specifications
the
and
emission
details.
limits, the emission profile, all that, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so and I'll ask them where they are on that. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Nguyen of an engineering nature before we move on to our inspector? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Feldman, you may introduce your next witness.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask you to switch seats, but you're so comfortable, both of you, where you are, that you could just stay. Mr. Chen, would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is David Chen, D-A-V-I-D. Last name is C-H-E-N.
How are you employed at the South Coast AQMD?
I'm an air quality inspector too.
How long have you held that position?
For air quality inspector, a year and 9 months.
Okay. And did you take the oath this morning?
Yes, I did.
Is this your first time testifying before the hearing board?
Yes, that is correct.
I'm sure everyone is going to be especially nice to you considering it's your first time, especially Senator Holden. Isn't that right, Senator Holden? You're going to be especially nice to Mr. Chen because it's his very first time testifying before the hearing board. Are you nervous?
A little, yes.
See, you're under oath and you answered truthfully. I think we're off to a good start. Are you familiar with the Ralph's facility in Compton?
Yes, I visited there.
Okay. How many times have you visited the facility?
I visited the facility 3 times now.
Okay. And could you describe the facility for the hearing board?
So this facility is a reclaim facility, so it follows the reclaim rules for reporting emissions. The facility has a creamery on site where they bottle milk as well as produce ice cream. They also have some banana ripening rooms, and as well as the refrigeration and storage for their distribution center. Along with that, their site has backup generators due to any issues with power failures or anything like that. And the last thing on the permit is their digester system.
It's quite large, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you have any idea how big it is?
I don't have the specifics, but it did take us quite a while to walk the perimeter.
Are there any residences nearby?
So after the inspection, I did drive around the area. It is all industrial and just businesses for the most
Okay,
part.
so no schools,
Not to my knowledge.
hospitals?
Not to my knowledge.
When did you most recently visit the facility?
The most recent inspection was on January 9th of 2020.
And have you had the occasion to observe the operation of the waste-to-energy process there?
Yes.
Is it essentially how Mr. Nguyen described it?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not going to make you go through that as well. Do you know what type of waste is used to feed the biodigester at the facility?
Yeah, similar to what Mr. Nguyen's had described, it's going to be mostly vegetable produce as well as older baked goods, as well as some of the waste from the creamery.
Did you have the occasion to visit the facility on April 11th of 2019?
Yes, that was our first inspection.
That was your very first inspection. Did you go there alone?
No, I went with my supervisor, Melissa Sanchez, as well as another inspector, Christian Fieldings.
And could you just basically describe the nature of the inspection that was conducted on that day?
So the purpose of that inspection was the annual reclaim inspection. So we basically went along with the facility to take a look at all of the equipment that is described in their reclaim permit, as well as to take a general look around to make sure there's no equipment that was not on the permit that should have been.
Okay. And what did you find as the result of your inspection there?
So in terms of the inspection, our finding was more specific to the waste treatment portion. So we found that when we asked for the flare operating temperature, they provided us with a trend on their computer screen, and we saw that it was operating at below 1400.
Was it significantly below 1400 at any period?
At the time that we were looking at it, the trend showed that it was operating well below 1400.
Did you notice any other violations at the facility at that time?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Any other violations at the facility at that time?
The other violation that we had found at that time was that the stack flow monitor was not installed as required by the permit.
Okay, so I'm going to call the hearing board's attention to exhibit number 6. Mr. Chen, could you please identify what the hearing board is looking at?
So this is notice of violation P66172. So this was issued to Ralph's Grocery on April 25th, 2019. There's 2 items listed as the violations. One for violation of condition C 8.2, which is to operate the flare at above 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. The other line item is for violation of permit condition D 12.6, which is for operating the flare contrary to permit conditions to install the stack flow monitor.
And since the issuance of this notice of violation, has Ralph's installed the required stack flow monitor?
Yes.
Okay, and to the best of your knowledge, that's why we are not dealing with that stack flow monitor in this order for abatement hearing today, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I want to take this opportunity because I know that there have been there's been some confusion with notices of violation and the various dates on them, and I think that this is the perfect case to illustrate how the district crafts a notice of violation. So I want to reiterate for the board, if you will, the date of the actual inspection.
So the date of the actual inspection was April 11th, 2019.
And it says at the top right corner, date of violation is July 12th, 2018. So that's many months before the actual inspection. How did you determine that date?
So the scope of my inspection at the time was from since the last inspection. So the last inspection prior to me was performed in July 12th of 2018. So the scope of my inspection was just starting at July 12th, 2018 up to when I was performing my inspection.
So when you determined, as apparently you did, because you cited them for failing to operate the flare at 1400 degrees, when you looked at, well, let me back up. Did you request records from the facility to demonstrate past compliance with the temperature threshold?
Yes, I requested the temperature trends.
And did those temperature trends date back to July of 2018?
Yes,
And is that how you knew that the violation started at least in July of 2018?
correct.
Is it possible that it started even before July of 2018?
Yes,
But did you have any evidence to substantiate that?
not at the time of issuing the notice.
So that is why you put at the top that the date of violation is 7/12/2018, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Now I'm going to draw your attention to the date at the bottom right of the notice of violation, where it says 4/25/19. You see that? That's the date the notice was served. What does that mean?
So that is the day I wrote up the notice of violation and has sent a copy over to Mr. Eaton.
So even though you may find a violation at a facility on the day of the inspection, it doesn't mean necessarily that you will issue the notice of violation on that date, is that right?
Correct.
And this date at the bottom will always reflect the date that it was actually served on the facility, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, we've also done something rather unusual in this case, and in all fairness, it's because we thought this might be contested. We've attached your report to the notice of violation. So if the hearing board just flips past the notice of violation itself, you will see the inspector's report that accompanies the notice of violation. Is that typically shared with the facility?
No, that is not.
Okay, that's for internal use so that supervisors, managers, and ultimately legal will understand what happened during the course of your inspection, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if the hearing board wants to review this, will they see exactly what you did during the course of that inspection and where these dates come from?
Yes.
Okay. I want to direct your attention to the very last page of the tab. And if the hearing board will go to that, and you'll see a certified mail receipt.
Yes.
So you left the facility and served the notice of violation by certified mail, is that right?
Correct.
And you have the receipt to substantiate that they received it, is that right?
Yes.
And if you look at the very top of the first photocopy, where it shows where the mail was sent, it has D. Chen, and it references the notice of violation, and it says 4/25/19. Is that the day you mailed it?
That is the day the administration staff mailed it.
Right. And so that is why on the date served on the notice of violation, it says April 25th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. During the course of your assignment to this facility, did you issue another violation to Ralph's, another notice of violation to Ralph subsequent to this one in April?
Yes, another notice of violation, P66176, was issued to the facility.
And if the hearing board flips to Exhibit 7, they will see a copy of that notice of violation, is that correct?
Correct.
And was this notice of violation issued as the result of another inspection at the facility?
No, it was not.
How did you come to determine that the facility was still in violation of the temperature threshold?
After issuing the first notice of violation, we performed follow-ups with the facility requesting additional data to ensure if the issue had been fixed or if it's an ongoing issue.
So the facility was sending you data from the flare that reflected the temperature?
Correct.
And how often did they do this?
Initially, it was at request, but at a later date, I had requested Mr. Eaton to provide it to me on a monthly basis.
And he did so?
Yes.
And what did you do when you got the data?
When I got the data, I would review it to determine if there were any dips below 1400. Usually in the email provided by Mr. Eaton, he would also summarize if there were any dips. And then I would just kind of tally and summarize the data.
Okay, so you would have an email correspondence with Mr. Eaton that would accompany the submission of the data? Am I understanding you?
Yes.
Okay. And are copies of those emails available to the hearing board as part of this exhibit?
Yes, it will be part of the notice of violation.
Okay, and I would just tell the hearing board that as you flip through this exhibit, you will come to an email chain between Mr. Chen and Mr. Eaton, who I believe will be a witness here today. And they speak for themselves. Now, what format was the data transmitted to you? In what format?
So it was provided to me in Excel format and CSV format, which is also openable, or you could also open it in Excel.
So it's essentially digitally?
Yes, correct.
If you had produced all the data for the hearing board so that they could see on a daily basis Ralph's compliance rate with this condition, how many pages would we have had to produce?
A few thousand. A few thousand?
So I will call your attention to Exhibit 9. Is that a summary that you prepared at the direction of counsel in contemplation of this hearing?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And could you just briefly explain to the hearing board what they're looking at here?
So this is a summary of the data that was sent to me for 2018 as well as 2019. So the first column is obviously the labels for the period. The second label is percentage of time. So that is the percentage of minutes, since the data provided to me was minute data. So the percentage of minutes within that period of time that were in violation of the permit condition. And then the third column, which is days with deviations, is just the number of days within each of those periods that there was at least 1 minute where the flare dropped below the 1400 degrees requirement.
Okay. So if I'm reading this correctly, if you look at year 2018, you've put the grand total at the top, is that right?
Yes, correct.
So for 333 days in 2018, they were operating at least some points during the day below the 1400
Yes, correct.
threshold. Thank you. And in 2019, that total dropped to 178 days. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Do you have an opinion as to why the compliance rate was greatly improved from one year to the next?
So I guess the first thing to note is that it started improving already, mostly after Q2, which is after April when we performed our inspection. So the first thing that the facility did was they replaced a faulty thermocouple, and that resolved the issue for a period of time. Then afterwards, when they had issues maintaining the flare temperature operating above 1400, it was due to either low flow issues due to lack of feed or from issues occurring in the digester.
Mr. Balakapalan had a question about whether the flare has been tested recently. Do you know if it has been?
Yes, there was a source test performed.
And what, did it test in compliance?
Yes.
Okay, so the NOx limit is not at issue here today, is it?
No.
Did you have an opportunity to review the proposed findings for the hearing board that is attached to in the binder as Exhibit 1?
Yes.
And on the basis of your experience with this facility and what you've observed and your ongoing correspondence with Ralph's, do you believe that this approach represents the best way to ensure compliance going forward?
Yes.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Feldman, for walking us through all of that, and
You're more
we
than welcome.
we are pampered now.
I'm sure the rest of the attorneys want me to caution you that you should not expect this in future stipulated orders for abatement, this kind of binder. But I would like to take this opportunity to move our exhibits into evidence.
I was going to ask if you'd like to. Any objection, Mr. McDonough?
No objection.
Okay, so all exhibits are now in evidence. I think we should take a break, and then we'll go to any questions from Mr. McDonough and of the board when we return. So let's take a 15-minute break, and we'll be back timely at 10:50. We are off the record. Where? Oh, they are. We're back on the record. Mr. McDonough, did you have any questions for Mr. Chen?
I do not.
Okay. Board members, any questions for Mr. Chen? Mr. Balagopalan?
Your first time here, right?
Yes, correct.
No further questions? I'll ask one later.
Always a character. Mr. Balagopalan?
Mr. Chen, I'm looking at the inspector report, and by the way, it's a good report, and I do see some summaries of telephone conversation you had subsequently that was documented. If I look at the first page of the report, I mean, not the first page, where it says inspector report and the background.
Which exhibit are you looking at?
Oh,
Because there's
okay,
two
sorry.
reports.
It's 6,
Six, okay.
and where the notice of violation P 66172, and the associated report with that. So on the, where it says inspector report,
Yes.
you have that. So I see on the fourth bullet item that it was last inspected July 12, 2018 by another inspector and found to be operating compliance.
Yes.
That mean he didn't check the operating compliance with the temperature or everything, all the permit condition at that time?
I cannot speak
Speak to that?
Yeah.
So, okay, so, but then subsequently, when you were out there when was the first time you were out there? In 2019, April?
Yes.
That's when you noticed the temperature was 443 degrees Fahrenheit?
Correct.
Is that when you then requested for their data?
Yes.
And then when you went back and looked at it, then you found from the date of that date of that inspection, when the other inspector was there, you gave
Yeah.
the violation from that date?
Yeah, that was
moving
the
forward?
scope of my inspection, was
Inspection.
starting from that date.
On that day. Now, I noticed also on the documentation you had on the, I think it was 4/24/2019, and it's on the, it's not page, let's see, after the,
506? Oh, no. it's
sorry,
past
yeah, I think, oh, yeah, it's page 5 or 6, thank you, it's there. Page 5 or 6, maybe on the third paragraph from the bottom. And this is where Mr. Scott Caso had, where the meeting was, and he talked about getting an order of abatement. Now, it says here the facility looked into possibly renting a thermal oxidizer
Yes, correct.
with the various location to, do you know, I don't see that in the order. Do you know any reason why they haven't, when that proposal fell through, or?
I think Ralph would probably better explain that.
Okay. I think also in response to a question Ms. Feldman had, you indicated you were aware of a source test that was conducted at the facility?
Yes, correct.
Let's see. Do you know what the test was for?
I don't recall the specifics of that.
Do you know
test.
what date? Let's see.
I would have to look at it.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking, and maybe it's relevant, is if the the NOx limit, if they was tested for that, and if that was a date when the temperature is low, then the NOx, at 400 degrees versus 1400 degrees, there's a big difference. The NOx would show compliance potentially, but I'll check with the facility, see what date it was, so.
Okay.
I just wanted to know that. No, that's all I had, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Chen?
Yes, I had.
Ah,
No, let this.
oh, Senator House.
In your background report, I didn't go through A to Z, but I'll ask you a question. That you at any time made aware of the fact why the feed or the various meats and other products were not being fed into the system at that time? It would not be used as a feed. Were you aware? Which would make it impossible to obtain the 1400 degrees.
So during meetings with the facility, they had informed us of varying reasons of why there may be interruptions to their feed.
And you still issued an NOV, huh?
Yes, correct.
You're tough. Okay, but you didn't do a background on report on the second violation? No, I don't see it. You did?
Yes, the report is attached to the second violation as well. If you flip over to tab 7 and you go past the NOV, you'll see that his report is there as well.
Yeah, it starts on page 3 for the background.
Page 3?
Keep flipping, you'll see page 3 of 5 at the top, an inspector report.
Oh, yeah, all right, thank you. No further questions?
Thank you.
I'm
Mr. Balakrishnan, you had a,
busy today.
you
Yeah,
had a follow-up.
Mr. Chair, I had a follow-up. In the permit in Exhibit 2 that we have, I'm not, do you happen to know if, and this was issued probably in 2018, if there's a condition limiting the usage of the flare to standby, or has that been removed?
I do not have any knowledge of such a condition.
But were you aware that there was a condition before that limited to either standby or to,
No,
no?
no.
Okay.
No, there was none, or no, you were not aware?
I'm unaware if there is one.
Okay. All right, thank you.
We can recall the engineer if you want to know if there ever was such a condition.
Yeah, because there was testimony, I think, by the engineer saying it was supposed to be on standby and, only
He
to be
testified
used.
that that was the intent.
Intent, but was there a condition of that intent?
We can ask Mr. Nguyen now, if you'd like, given that we're pretty much at the end of Mr. Chen's testimony. So I don't know if Mr. Nguyen can answer that?
Yeah, do you know of such a condition that limited the usage
There's
of
no,
the flare?
not to my knowledge, there's no condition limiting them, but the permit description, in the equipment description for the flare, it says standby.
And does it say that now too?
Yes, that has not changed.
And what's your understanding of standby then?
Again, that the primary use is for the microturbines at the time and the boilers for the digester gas, and any excess above and beyond that not sent to those equipment would be sent to the flare. So that's why they came up with that equipment description of standby. It's not exact. That's why it says standby.
But it's not operating as a standby right now.
No.
So do you see?
Well, again, what do you mean by?
I mean, it is not as, because the microturbines are removed out of service.
Oh, yes.
it's
So,
not-
so its usage now is not congruent with how it's described in the permit in that sense. Yes, it's everything that is being produced in terms of digester gas at the facility currently is being sent to the flare.
So there's a discrepancy in the description, the way it's permitted right now. Because there's no condition to say 25% or 10% or whatever should be flared or something like that.
Correct, and that's why they're trying to propose the reciprocating engine to bring it back to what it should be, its original intent.
And your understanding of standby is only, let's say when the engine is running and so forth, that's only when there's an emergency or an upset condition that they would use that?
Emergency upset condition, or when they're producing too much digester gas that the microturbines, or in this case, the new engine, cannot handle.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Chen or Mr. Nguyen? Senator?
In the order, it says that they will install a flow monitoring device. That's the
Can you-
first one of the requirements.
Can you point to where you're looking? Is this back again in number
Yeah.
2?
To measure the flare, the temperature of the flare.
Are you in the order section or the findings
The
section?
general description was, shall prepare and submit to district a compliance plan including the following:
Oh, okay, so you are in the order.
You're right.
So that's back on paragraph 2 of the order, condition 2?
Yes. Look at number 2. And line 4, second page. That you have to have the monitoring equipment in place. That's part of the plan.
So the monitoring for this is in regards to the thermocouple for monitoring the temperature. And it's not in regards to the stack flow monitor.
Now what?
It's not in regards to the stack flow monitor. It's in regards to the thermocouple, which they already have installed.
They have installed that. But in your report, on page 4,
Which are you referring to?
after the section 7, exhibit 7, top of the first paragraph. You were informed that the facility had not installed a stack flow monitor on the flare, that the facility did not have a current plan to do so. When did they decide they're going to change? Based on the order, they're saying they will change.
The evidence that we've received and the testimony we received is that that has now been installed. And the only thing left is to receive the testing results.
Also, based on the testimony, you need to distinguish the thermocouple from the stack flow monitor. They always had a thermocouple there to monitor the temperature at the flare. That was never a problem, except at some point the thermocouple wasn't functioning properly and had to be replaced. The stack flow monitor, they were cited for not having it installed in a timely fashion, and they have since put in a stack flow monitor.
That's how you,
But that was much more recent.
that's how you learned that the temperatures were below what
No,
they should be.
the thermocouple told the facility and the district inspector that the flare was not operating at the requisite temperature. That's what the testimony was.
All right, thank you.
And the confusion, Ms. Feldman, is that when the original petition for this matter was submitted, at that time, there was no stack flow monitor, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so for now, between that time and the time of this hearing, it now has been installed, and so we're only looking at the temperature issue. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for either witness at this point? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chen, you did an excellent job, and in particular, you were very well prepared and answered very directly, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, did you have any other witnesses, Ms. Feldman?
No other witnesses, thank you.
Okay, Mr. McDonough, your first witness.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can you please state your name and spell your name for the record?
Matthew Eaton, M-A-T-T-H-E-W-E-A-T-O-N.
And have you taken the oath today?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell the board what your position and role are at Ralph's?
For Ralph's and Kroger, the parent company, Regional Manager of Environmental Compliance for the Southwest U.S.
Okay. We've heard a lot of background description by the district on the operation of the distribution warehouse. I'm not going to take you through that, except to just ask you if you generally agree with the district's description of the digester's function and its environmental benefit?
I do.
Okay. Can you explain to the board, why does the digester need a flare?
So the digester, of course, it makes gas, and that gas just has to be processed, whether it's through microturbines, reciprocating compressor, or in a backup situation, or in the current situation we're in, a flaring unit to combust that gas. So it is always a needed apparatus on these systems.
Is it safe to operate the digester without a flare?
No.
Can you explain to the board what temperature condition the flare needs to function properly and at full efficiency?
As the permit states, the 1400 degrees is the 1110.2 condition for proper combustion of that gas.
Okay. And again, we've heard a lot of description about the issues you previously experienced with the operation of the digester and the flare. I'll ask you again, did you hear anything that's inconsistent with your understanding, general understanding of the background?
No.
Okay. So let's then talk about, I'd like to just fill in a couple of blanks through questions that came up in testimony. Let's talk about some of the issues you faced with the digester, particularly starting with the supply of gas itself. So why was Ralph's Kroger, why was the facility getting less gas and less consistent gas to the unit?
Well, this started back in 2014 when we had the interruptions and the overflows before my time, but it's historically known that we had issues because of the meat, because of the dairy, a bit of a runaway reaction inside those systems. And at that time, we were working collaboratively with the AQMD and decided to remove the meat and dairy from that process because it was just a little too volatile for the current process going in. That had a drastic reduction to the amount of gas that system can produce. And we didn't have nearly the level of issues with temperature and whatnot as we are now. Further factors made that, and that really goes hand in hand with the reduction of stores that we had with the Ralph's and Food for Less locations in California that were feeding the system. And that, coupled with our success of the Zero Waste, Zero Hunger program that Kroger implemented, we donate a lot more food now. A good thing, but it ended up being a fairly significant bad thing for this system. So those main contributors really continue to just kick that system down a notch to where we're operating now, which is an over-engineered system operating on its extreme low end.
We also heard in testimony that the facility had a number of issues with faulty thermocouple operation at times. Can you explain what those faults in the thermocouples, what problems those give you in terms of monitoring accurate temperature?
Right. Well, in relation to the inspection performed by Mr. Chen in April of 2018, that 443 temperature is actually a fault temperature. The thermocouple had faulted, and it was reading flat at 443. That was not specifically the temperature of the stack, but that was the reading that it was collecting. So that leads to a violation in essence because you don't have an accurate temperature read. We have since implemented further thermocouples and reprogrammed an existing second thermocouple to be a redundant system. So if one goes out, you have the other one reading the appropriate temperature. So they can be a little tricky in that. And they do burn out quite often. It's very hot in those stacks, so they don't last long.
Do you feel with the replacement thermocouple that you now have regular accurate readings of temperature in the flare?
Yes.
So we talked about the fact that less food was coming to the digester. We also talked about the fact that the testimony before us talked about the fact that the flare was having trouble managing low flows of gas. Can you give us a brief description of why the flare needs a minimum flow of gas to operate?
It goes back to the system as a whole and the flare being very over-engineered. It's supposed to handle a lot higher volume, and it was never anticipated that you'd be down around the bottom of what the flare capabilities are right now, and that's just related to amount of gas running through the system.
Okay, so fair to say that too much gas to the flare causes excessive flaring, but too little gas to the flare can also cause temperature problems.
That's correct.
So we heard testimony about the notices of violation the company received. Do you agree that the company received these violations at approximately the dates that the inspector mentioned in his testimony?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so I want to focus now on what the company did to address the problem. So we've established that there's been a lot of issues with this equipment. What did Ralph's do to try to address this situation once and for all?
We took a very technical look into the system as it sat and saw if there was any room for improvements and tweaking of blowers, of the cycling of the gas, as Mr. Nguyen stated, and just a lot of little tweaks and changes, and now we're pushing the boundaries of what the system can handle because it isn't a non-storage system. But we are in a safe range at this point. It's being a little more aggressive on how we manage that flow rate to the flare. We're going to continue to review that and continue to push an optimization of that system as it sits as of now while we're in our process of putting in future implementations.
So in prior testimony by Mr. Chen, did you hear Mr. Chen's testimony referring to Exhibit 9, talking about the percentage of time and days with deviations reflecting the problems with the flare temperature?
Yes, I did.
Now, you see I'll turn your attention to Exhibit 9. You see that in the exhibit, we have a column for percentage of time, and we have a column for days of deviations. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Is the percentage of time calculated simply a days with deviations divided by total days of operation?
That's what it appears.
So these percentages are not, for example, the number of minutes the flare might have been out of compliance over the total number of minutes of its operation?
That is correct.
What do you expect if, I know you don't have those calculations, but what do you expect in terms of the level of percentage of time out of compliance if we were to do a minute-by-minute calculation?
I believe it would be greatly reduced. I mean, you could have a day, as stated by Mr. Chen, where 1 minute was below 1400 degrees, which would trigger a full 24-hour day of non-compliance. So, and it could be more, of course, but.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify, because I'm looking at number 9, and I'm looking at that chart. Did you just testified that it is a basic days of the month calculation, is that, am I?
That's what it appeared.
Okay, because I'm looking at 2018 in February, and it said 12 days with deviations, and it was 26.19%. And then if you skip down to the bottom in November, it's also 12 days, and it's 0.59%. Does that, so I want to understand if we are reading it correctly.
Yeah, I would just say this is the district's exhibit, so you may want to ask them about the methodology they used, but it appeared to us that it was number of days and certainly not a breakdown of minutes over total minutes of operation, but I think the district's probably in a better position to answer that question.
Okay.
Okay, so we were talking about the fact that you had these days of deviation. So nevertheless, even though this chart we don't think monitors minute by minute percentage of time and deviation, nevertheless, you would agree that the facility had roughly these number of days with some kind of deviation.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so let's talk about the steps that Ralph's took to address these problems. So before we came to this hearing, you talked about installing a new thermocouple. Were there other steps that Ralph's took to try to get the temperature to be compliant in the flare?
Yes, we partnered with local consulting companies and some we had been using already to assist in giving us that knowledge if it's safe to make future tweaks to blowers, to processes, to allow better flow rate to that flare and keep it from spiking up and then spiking down so fast and losing that 1400 degree temperature.
Did you make any changes with respect to process alarming in the flare?
We did. We added more alarms to the thermocouple errors, to flare startup and shutdown alarming. Definitely a lot of improvements to allow for a more visual and representative look at our system.
And you may have heard in testimony before the district testified that in response to citation, the company permitted and installed the permanent stack flow monitor?
That is correct.
And what does the stack flow monitor do in terms of allowing you to maintain your temperature within compliant range?
The stack flow monitor isn't too much for the temperature compliance. It was just to bring us out of that NOV status for that portion. Since we were using that unit more as a non-standby, more as an operational large source, that ended up tipping the scales and requiring that flow monitor be in place.
Okay, so the stack flow monitor is completely separate and apart from the temperature issues we're talking about in the flare.
That's correct.
So let's talk about what the result of all of these internal process changes was. Were you able to improve the flow and the quality of the gas to the flare?
We improved the steadier state of flow to the gas, allowing it to run more frequently and not be out of compliance as much.
And this is reflected in the district's, again, Exhibit 9, showing that the number of days with deviations dropped from roughly 63% to 24%?
That's correct.
Okay. But even with those measures, were there still times when the flare was burning below its required temperature?
That is correct. We still have what we consider low flow conditions where there's just not enough gas to go around.
Okay, so then let's talk about the permanent fix that's being proposed in this stipulated order. Why is it that the company is proposing this course of action, i.e. putting in a permanent reciprocating engine and putting in a permanent smaller flare?
Having the smaller flare will cover us on that low-end situation where there's low-flow situations, not enough gas to run the larger flare currently installed. We'll cover our bases there. We're really looking to expand the bandwidth that this system can handle, not so much of a narrow, with the microturbines, if you didn't have 100 CFM of gas, it didn't run. With the reciprocating generator set, it will allow for a much greater bandwidth to adjust up and down and handle those fluctuations of a system of this nature.
So do you expect that the reciprocating engine will allow you to maintain finer and better control over your temperature compliance?
Yes, greatly.
And then same question with the smaller flare. What is the benefit of a smaller flare, and why is that going to help keep you in temperature compliance?
Well, learning from the system as we've evolved, we're going to continue to be on that low end of gas production until you make greater changes to it. It can handle higher, but it's going to sit at the lower for the interim. And having that smaller flare, that turns into our process unit as a more reliable source to maintain compliance.
Okay, and as you go forward with this plan to install the new engine, the new smaller flare, does the company intend to continue the process improvements you've already put into place with process alarming, improving your monitoring of the thermocouples, your process improvements?
Yes, this whole ordeal has opened the eyes of a lot of folks all the way up the chain to the top to put more attention and time into operating these systems properly.
Okay, and then I'm just going to finish up with questions about your anticipated compliance plan and the timing. Because you just got the internal budget approval recently, what does that mean in terms of your timing to be able to provide a compliance plan and propose deadlines to this board?
Right now, where we sit, we're on the right track. We're very positive to move towards this stipulated agreement with the AQMD and get where we need to be. In that April 15th timeframe, we felt gives us enough time to identify proper contractors, get purchase orders cut, and allow us to gather data to start the small flare, to get that in place and move us back into compliance with that 1400 degree set point the fastest.
If it's possible for the company to move faster and prepare an application sooner than April 2010 or 2020, would you intend to inform the district of that fact and file before that date?
Yes, we plan to take every step possible.
Will Ralph's / Kroger be taking all other steps to expedite the preparation of permit applications and try to streamline the process as much as possible?
Yes.
So describe to us where you are in the process. Has a contractor been retained yet to install this new equipment?
We have not retained a contractor yet.
Okay. Briefly explain to us what the process is going out. What steps does Ralph's Kroger have to take in order to get a contractor approved and to ultimately get this process permitted and constructed?
Well, we have to review multiple contractors to make sure we have the most competitive bid and give us the right type of install with the right type of background. We're not wanting to rush into a situation with a contractor that hasn't done this before, even though they might be less expensive. We want to have the right install, and we got to go through the process to make sure we are identifying that properly. Aside from finishing the final approval for all the funding and getting that funding out, that's coming very soon, and we're going to be going light speed, attempting to get this where we need to be.
Okay, so until the new smaller flare can be installed, is the company proposing any mitigation measures to help minimize temperature compliance between now and then?
We're going to continue to look at what we have as a system, and we are continually reviewing certain interruptions in the system, and can we make tweaks to this piece of equipment, to that piece of equipment, to optimize and minimize. So that is something we will continue to do.
I'll just quickly turn your attention again to Exhibit 9, and if I could point out to you on the exhibit in 2019, if you follow down the column to Q2, May, you notice the percentage of time with deviations drops dramatically in that month. Do you see that, 0.45%?
Yes.
What significant event happened in May of 2019 to produce that difference?
That was where we started implementing with the existing contractors the tweaks and changes to the system, the blower speed, the cap pressure on the top of the tank, and really working with those small rooms for air to optimize the flare.
And do you believe the experience with the flare going forward will look more like the data starting in May of 2019 and continuing on?
I have no reason to suspect otherwise.
And let me just deal with a couple of questions you got in, or the other side got in part of its testimony. Is it an option for Ralph's to simply just turn off the digester and flare until you have all this new equipment built?
Technically, it would be an option. The diversion would generate, in our opinion, a lot more emissions for the local communities. It would be diversions of trucking. You'd end up going to composting facilities or landfills. This organic matter has to be composted or digested somewhere. And we do view that in our process now, we are meeting compliance standards as far as NOx, CO, that type of operation when it's running at the 1400 degrees. And we view that being the best possible scenario for compliance and combustion of that.
Okay, and then you also heard questions about why doesn't the company install a temporary flare that could potentially help you comply until you get the new equipment up and running? Did you look at that option?
We did. We looked at options for the unit that David mentioned and portable flares. Based on the area as a whole, they're tied up for a number of weeks with existing facilities, and the best time frame and best options that we determined was inevitably to actually purchase the new smaller flare. That would give us the best time frame to get in place.
Okay, and again, just to sum up, have you reviewed the draft order that's before the board as Exhibit 2?
Yes, I have.
I'm sorry, Exhibit 1, I guess it looks like. And do you believe that that order will provide the full and permanent fix that the flare needs to remain in temperature compliance?
I do.
That's all I have for now.
Ms. Feldman, any questions?
Yes, just a few. Do you know when the existing flare was last source tested?
It was in third quarter of 2019.
And what was it tested for?
It was a full compliance test, so it did have VOC, NOx, CO, I believe there was a H2S, and we did partner with some AQMD representatives to take a look at ammonia, and they were all very positive. There wasn't any ammonia issues, there's no H2S issues, and we met all compliance criteria at that time.
Thank you. How much will the reciprocating engine cost approximately?
Ballpark figure for what we're looking at is just south of $5 million.
And do you have any idea at this point about how long it'll take to fabricate the engine?
It does take some time. Estimates are in the 8 to 10 month range, I believe.
Okay. So that's why April of 2021 is our goal for final compliance.
That's correct.
I am trying, based on all the testimony we've heard so far, to come up with a sensible date for Ralph's to return to this board for a status hearing and be able to provide meaningful information to the board about where we stand and what's still ahead. Given that you haven't even issued a purchase order and that you're in no position to apply for a permit to construct, what would you suggest as an appropriate date on which Ralph's would be prepared to come back and provide this board with an enforceable compliance schedule that will run from the date of that hearing to April of 2021?
Currently, we're looking at April 30th.
April 30th of this year, obviously.
This year.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions for the witness.
Board members, questions for Mr. Eaton? Okay, Mr. Balagopalan?
Excuse me, 1 second. Mr. Eaton, when we're talking about low flow, high flow, can you give in terms of flow rates? What are you talking about?
Low flow condition, the flare currently struggles to maintain 1400 degrees. If it's below 110 CFM, it can go upwards of 500, 550 CFM, and that's quite a bit of gas production.
So currently it's between,
Currently, it can fluctuate, summer months, winter months. It is temperature sensitive to that, and it's going to normally sit between 150 to 200.
and previously, do you know what it was when all the microturbines and the boilers?
When we had the meat in place, we were north of 400.
400, okay.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned in 2014, there was some issues with the digester.
Yes.
And that's why you stopped taking meat and dairy products?
That was the agreement with the AQMD and local engineering, that it was a little too unsafe, and we did not want to have another interruption with the system and overflow. It was not good for anybody, of course.
Can you just elaborate briefly what happened at that time?
It was, in essence, an overflow. I think it was just a pot boiling over. That's exactly what happened, a runaway reaction based on some really volatile organics in the place. Meat combusts or not combusts, but decomposes very fast. And so does dairy, and it made a lot of gas the system wasn't able to handle. And it did have a matter. The matter itself overflowed into the area of the digester. So.
Yeah, I actually was familiar at that time when it happened. But when did you stop using the digester gas for the boilers, and why?
I believe that was in the early 2016, late 2015 timeframe. The reason for it was we were already starting to see a big drop in amount of gas because we removed the meat and the dairy. And the boilers they're an older boiler. They're 1970s is when they were installed. And they require a very steady and consistent gas rate. And if you take them up and down based on fluctuations in the digester like we were seeing, they weren't running right. And we at that time determined that the boilers could not run on that. We just moved those strictly to natural gas. And as we state now in the permit, it's completely disconnected, and it's only natural gas to those boilers. Everything at that point in time went to the microturbines, and subsequently farther down the line, unfortunately, as the gas quality dropped and the amount dropped.
And I think you said that it varies by the month, the quality. I mean, the fluctuation is there by seasons too?
Yes.
The gas production,
It
summer
does.
versus
Some,
winter?
yeah.
Some. And so, have you done a feasibility study of the engine and how reliably it can operate under those low conditions and the fluctuations?
I can't speak specifically to the engineering group that we're working with doing such, but we do ask that they ensure that we purchased and install the right unit based on current operating conditions and future, as we do attempt to bring back in outside sources and whatnot. That's why the reciprocating compressor is so great for the systems, that it gives you that really large bandwidth to fluctuate gas quality and amount.
And do you know if that includes pre-treatment of the gas in some cases, because there may be siloxanes or something in maybe not in this type of gas, but.
Yeah, no siloxane or anything like that, but there is a pre-treatment scrubbing system before it goes into the reciprocating compressor, just raw.
And, okay, so then, when you said it has to be fabricated, are there no off-the-shelf type, for the size range available? That why does it have to be custom fabricated for your?
Yeah, unfortunately not. These units are very specific to given conditions, and because there's not very many clients out there across the U.S. that are doing these types of digesters with reciprocating compressors or generators, it's rare. So they have to start from scratch, and they want to make sure they dial it in perfectly to the type of system you have.
And you're just looking just at power, not combined heat and power, or just?
No cogen at the moment.
No cogen at the moment. Okay. You mentioned the testing that was done. Do you happen to know what was the date of the test?
I don't have the date offhand. I did send an email to Mr. Chin. It was a couple weeks ago, unfortunately, but I can't recall the specific date.
And do you recall if on that date you were hitting the 1400 degrees and that during the test?
Yes, we were hitting 1400 degrees plus.
Plus on that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Verdugo Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on the fact that you said it would take 8 to 10 months, okay, yet you want a status report on the 30th of April, and you haven't signed a contract yet with a contractor to do the work, how realistic is that date?
The April 30th? Or
Right.
We're still going to be working in the background, as of today even, moving these steps forward as fast as possible. And we do feel that the April 30th is very doable.
Have you spoken to a contractor yet?
We have. We have generated multiple proposals from contractors, and we just are waiting on final say-so on who will be selected. So we're definitely not from scratch. It was a big package was sent to corporate staff for final review.
And when do you expect to have that decision?
I can't speak specifically for them, but it is going to be very soon. I can't put a date, unfortunately, but it's on their
Very
desks.
soon, meaning a couple of weeks, a month?
I don't think it would be more than a month, honestly.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I just want to follow, and then Senator, and so the intention is once you have that in place, that you would very soon thereafter apply for the permit through the district?
Yes, we would
Okay.
do so.
Okay, thank you. Senator?
How does the compliance plan differ from the compliance schedule, if at all?
The compliance plan as in, elaborate for me, I'm sorry.
Is what?
Could you elaborate a little bit on the compliance?
You talk about a compliance plan in order, first, the second order.
I apologize. Yeah, it actually doesn't differ really at all. We're moving towards that end result that is here in the stipulated.
Yeah, but you want to have that by April 15th.
We expect to have a plan in place, yes.
You know, because when the first report on April 30th, you reiterated that you're going to have a compliance schedule, and you said there's no difference.
We're going to have the schedule in place, but we're also at the same time developing that compliance plan to have a complete understanding for the board and the AQMD on.
The schedule is synonymous to same as the plan.
They're related, yes.
All right. We'll hear you on the 30th.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify for myself. So you mentioned that you've already done tweaks to the blowers and process alarming so that you've done this. You've created a better, more even flow. Is that correct?
That's correct. And yeah.
Okay, so including those things have been done. So including a condition to continue that is not really necessary because those, or to continue tweaks, are they required?
Continued tweaks, they might be and they might not be required. It depends on the situation that comes up, but we're open to continuing to optimize the system.
Right, and that I see as part of as already part of the plan that you're coming up with. But I mean, the progress you've already made, those were permanent changes, is that correct?
That's right. They're not going to change. They're working.
Okay. The other question I had, and again, we don't, when we're looking at an order for abatement, I'm not going way back and looking at fault or anything like that, but I did want to understand why it might have happened that we were seeing these large percentages of noncompliance with temperature, and you were keeping those records and monitoring, but didn't know it. Do you have any explanation of that? Because I just want to make sure that's not happening.
Report on a regular basis. They were not bringing it up to the compliance team and to higher level management that there indeed was a problem. So unfortunately, we were caught by surprise as well at the wrong time.
Were they trained to understand what was in the permit and what the temperature should be?
They were.
Okay. And has that been rectified, that communication lapse?
It has, and some personnel changes have been made.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Balagopalan.
Go ahead.
Senator?
I just had two final questions. How long have you been with the company?
Myself since October of 2017.
You ever hear Ron Burkle?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Balagopalan.
Now, Mr. Eaton, you said that there was another company running the digester, the controls and all for the system?
It was our company. It was just the personnel working for that digester group worked very autonomously. I mean, traditionally, we are just a distribution center with a creamery. This was added on to this site. Some personnel was put in place to manage and operate that system, and it was not done effectively, obviously.
We saw some exhibit where Feed, the company, was involved. Are they still?
Feed is a company, Divert is the name of the consulting company, and they are still in place and working with us today to try and optimize what we have.
So they are the ones who on a day-to-day basis monitoring?
They help assist on-site staff of our own too, yes.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned I think there was discussion with compliance staff on the portable bringing out thermal oxidizer, and you said none were available at that time when you looked?
Yeah, we still have roughly a 26-week lead time associated with getting one on our site. So that was a recent look-in, very recent.
But if something were to suddenly get freed up, is that something you're open to looking at?
Based on where we're at in the process, if we were to attempt to bring on a portable or a temporary unit, the cost would trigger another capital committee review, and we'd in essence have to start over the process that we're already near ending with our capital committee. So coupled with that, the lead time on getting a portable on site, really our best option moving forward is progressing to the new installation of the smaller flare.
Now, are you able to quantify your excess emission? Because at the lower temperature, you're not getting the destruction efficiency that's required.
Right.
It's assumed at 1400 you'll get the organics and so forth. So are you able to quantify the excess emissions during this period?
Currently, we're not, because we've never tested at these lower temperature levels. It's always been, when it's running 1400 or more, as compliance should be.
So how are you going to do that calculation for excess emission during the period of the order?
That's not a required, because it's not a variance.
Oh, that's true, okay.
I was going to say
But it's important to understand, whether or not there's good cause to have some ballpark understanding.
Of course, and we're going to partner with our consultants to review that data thoroughly. I mean, our misunderstanding that we might be looking at days of out of compliance to minutes of out of compliance, we're working with our consultants to do the same.
And can you're saying you're working with the consultants, would you be able to have a little bit more of that data by April 30th when we would convene?
I can't say specific without talking to the consultants first, but I would say there's a good chance of it.
Okay, because that will be important when we set a compliance schedule. Any other questions? Okay. Mr. McDonough, do you have any other witnesses?
No, that's it for us.
Okay. Okay, is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard? Okay, I see none. Ms. Feldman, are you ready with closing?
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I think we have substantiated for you here today that you do have good cause to issue an order for abatement as stipulated by the parties that would allow Ralph's to continue operating its waste-to-energy program at the Compton facility pending final compliance achieved through the purchase of a reciprocating engine and smaller flare that will likely ensure that the flare can operate at the required 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. I agree that April 30th is an appropriate date upon which to return to the board for a status hearing. By that time, the permit to construct application will have been submitted, and so district engineers will have been given an opportunity to see exactly what is being proposed and how the equipment is going to perform. In addition, the compliance plan that is referenced in the order will be submitted so that we'll have a better handle on monitoring. Hopefully, we'll have better information about emissions from the process. So I would urge you to adopt that as the status hearing date. Historically, the only problem, I think, that the district has had with Ralph's, once it was determined that there was a much bigger problem with the implementation of this program and its ability to hold compliance with district rules, given the changes in the feed, the changes in the equipment that were being used to process the gas, is the time that apparently it takes Ralph/Kroger to respond. I understand it's a big company, but we work for a bureaucracy too. Ships move slowly. Hopefully, this order will put the company on notice that it now has some enforceable dates by which they have to take certain actions. and we won't experience any further delays in getting this company into compliance with district rules. That being said, again, I think the evidence gives you all the substantiation you need to make a good cause finding, and I do urge you to adopt the order as stipulated by the parties.
Before I move to Mr. McDonough, do you have a position with regard to how long you would like to see this hearing board retain jurisdiction? I see there's a 2020 date, and I don't know if that was by mistake or...
Well, I thought it would be revised at the status hearing, actually,
okay.
because that's when we're going to have a much better handle on the compliance period going forward. But based on this proposed order, I figured there was always the chance in my head, given our experience, that the company could decide to abandon the project entirely. You just don't know. So as long as they're coming back on April 30th, and there are no other measures that are enforceable prior to September, I thought that was a good date.
September.
For this particular incarnation of the stipulated order. Clearly, that will have to be revised as we get a better handle on the compliance schedule.
Thank you for
September
that. Sorry, Senator?
31st?
That is in condition 5, it would be September, I guess 30th.
Oh, it's 30th. 30 days has September.
That's right, April, June, and November, 2020. Thank you very much. Mr. McDonough, you're close.
Again, it's hard to put it better. I agree that we can, that the board can make the findings, and we would encourage the board strongly to adopt the order. We're very pleased to be able to keep this unit operating, and we're pleased to have come up with a cooperative resolution with the district.
Thank you. Board members, would anyone wish to begin discussion at this time? Okay. Would you like to, Mr. Balagopalan?
Yeah, having some background with this facility, the intention with food waste and diversion of the food waste from the landfill and the trips to the landfill, I think it was a laudable goal, and using the microturbines and the boiler, using the gas beneficially instead of flaring. And I think the intention in any situation is to use the gas beneficially, not for flaring, which is not the beneficial use of the gas. But it looks like now it is completely going to the flare, and but the microturbines have failed and they're having low flow issues. And I think, and I'm also aware of the situation when the digester tank burped and everything overflowed, and we heard why they stopped accepting meat and dairy, which reduced the flow. Hopefully that's the case. And it looks like they have the flow meter on there, but it's not been approved yet by the district, so we'll have to, pending that approval, we'll see what, we'll get a status update probably on April, whether that has been approved by the AQMD on the stack flow meter. So that's off the table right now. I think it was there in the initial petition, but now we're only looking at the thermocouple and the maintaining the temperature at 1400 degrees. So even 1 hour, 1 day, it's considered a violation. So it looks like, there's continued violation of that temperature range, and will probably continue until the solution they have identified is put into place.
I think how we got here is concerning, and I think it's very concerning when we see that there were such a large percentage of the time where the facility was not maintaining the temperature, but it wasn't brought to anyone's attention until the district inspectors had to bring it to the attention. That is concerning. However, we're not looking at what brought us here. We're really looking for where we're going. I do think that looking at it that way, I think that there is good cause for this order the way it is written, and in particular, we don't know yet what the time frame is going to be. I was very concerned about the March 2021 time frame to begin installation, which we're seeing on paragraph 17 of the findings. But I think it's more that we just don't know. at this point. And so hopefully that will be tightened up, and we'll be seeing a little bit more information on that in April, at the end of April. So with that, I think that that's fine for now. The other thing I have an issue with is the date of April 15th for the date of applying for the permit to construct. And if we decide to grant this order today, and it keeps that date, I'll be fine. However, I just want to be clear that we heard today testimony that there should be possibly within the next month a decision on contractor, and that shortly thereafter there can be a permit application put in with the district. That's been put in my notes. So when we come back on the 30th, we'll be looking at how quickly the facility moved and good cause as to whether or not we should be spinning it out if it's much longer than that. So hopefully it will move a lot quicker than that. But otherwise, we don't have a lot of information on emissions. That's troubling. However, we do see that this is an industrial area. We don't have the issue with very close residents or very close schools or very close hospitals. And so I think waiting until April 30th with just a real, very loose understanding that at the last source test, which I think was before some of these later issues, but regardless, was relatively not a very high amount of VOCs. That could be different right now. And so I'll want to see information on that coming back. But I think based on everything we're seeing here, I think there's good cause to move this forward and to adopt the order. I'd like to hear, though, anyone else's thoughts. Anyone else have any thoughts to add? Dr. Bernstein.
Brief comment. My colleagues have sort of delineated the concerns going forward with this petition. However, I do believe that there's good cause to grant the order for abatement, and we're all waiting with breathless anticipation the April 30th hearing to see exactly what has transpired with our heroes and how we go forward. We do appreciate the efforts that you're utilizing the technology to reduce organic waste and emissions from organic waste. We're all in the shadow of SB 1383, which is being implemented as we speak, with all those ramifications. And hopefully the public understands that most of the compliance with that particular legislation occurs in the kitchen, and that is really where the beginning of compliance for all of us takes place. And I know that in the city of Tustin, we've delineated with our waste hauler and educational process to our constituents so that they do understand what is impending and how to get there. So we'll await to see how the chemistry is affixed and works out, and look forward to the April 30th hearing. And thank you.
Any other thoughts, Senator? Ms. Verdugo-Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to compliment the staff on the beautiful report, so organized. We can just look at any piece of this if we have any questions.
Which we'll never see again, I think.
I've never seen that. Yeah, you did spoil us. But in any case, I also find good cause. I appreciate the efforts that your company is making to do the right thing and have that type of digester with the reciprocating engine. So I don't see any problem going forward. Thank you. As long as you keep to the dates.
Senator.
I think it's a good idea as well. It's America on the road becoming energy independent. And what we're doing, we're converting waste to energy. Another technology that we can use. I think what you do, since it's a new concept, you're refining the process to make it acceptable to the district, and that you're not polluting, trying to get the energy stabilized, the temperature stabilized. So I would support this and compliment you, both the district and Ralph's, whom I know, to be on the road to achieving success using waste to energy, becoming more energy independent.
And I think that what we're all saying is I think that when we look at good cause here, we do need to weigh the two. Energy independence and this process are very beneficial, but we definitely don't want to do it at the expense of the community of Compton. But I do think we're finding good cause. It sounds like we're all finding good cause, at least moving forward till April 30th to see what additional information we can have at that time. If there's no other discussion, Mr. Balagopalan?
Going to add, I think I would point to the district to revise the permit and explicitly say where the thermocouple should be located, because there's some issue raised in the location of the thermocouple, and the permit as issued right now is misleading, where the location, so they should revise the permit as soon as possible.
Sounds good. Anyone wish to make a motion? Or I could, if not. Okay, I will make a motion in the matter of South Coast Air Quality Management District versus Ralph's Grocery Company, case number 6166-1. I move that we grant the order for abatement, which will be stipulated between the parties, for the finding of good cause, as we just articulated. I further move that we adopt the proposed findings and decision of Exhibit 1, and we simply make the changes to delete the word proposed from the caption. And I think the only other change we need to make to it is on the second to last page, condition number 5, line 20, is to add the date of September 30th, 2020, to the current date through which we will retain jurisdiction, which will be revised once we have a status hearing on April 30th. Is there a second? Second. Dr. Burn, I'm sorry.
The order also has a blank for the status hearing return date.
It does?
I thought it did.
No, it does not.
Does it not? Oh,
No,
I'm
it does
sorry.
not.
That must have been a previous draft.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a previous one. So on just to be
apologies.
clear, that's on the third condition on line 9 of the current version, which is the one, just to be clear, the one for the record that we are adopting has April 30th, but thank you for that, 2020. Okay, and Dr. Bernstein has seconded that motion. Is there any discussion on the motion itself? Seeing none, Ms. Verdugo-Peralta, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Balagopalan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Senator, how do you vote? Dr. Bernstein, how do you vote? I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you for an excellent presentation, and we will see everyone on April 30th.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Is there any other business board members? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned, and we will see you all tomorrow.